Welcome to this week's episode of
Hello.
FUELcast TV. My good buddy Drew Spanning is joining me again, and we've got a topic to discuss this week that it's been going on for a little while now, and I think you're the perfect person to have on to talk about it to give it some context.
I think there's some, yeah.
And I think people want to kind of forget about the religious aspect of it.
Sure.
And
Sure. What's going on in Israel right now is crazy, right? Like, I think we all woke up or found out what was happening, and just kind of bracing yourself, like, oh, not this, like, not what's happening. This is not good.
I didn't have this one on my bingo card
No.
for 2023. That's for sure.
No.
Not to make light of, what's going on, but, to be honest,
You can't make light of it because it's like, I mean, yeah.
I would not have thought that after, the Trump administration and some things that, were done there.
All the peace deals.
Right. I mean, for the first time, they recognized the Capitol. Yep. And I mean, so there were things that Trump did that had never been done before. I admittedly don't have a lot of knowledge on this subject, sure, other than some basic stuff, so for me, this is kind of we've talked about it, off camera, but so this is kind of a tutorial for me. So I think that it's worth having a conversation about real quick about kind of what's going on over there, because it does relate to, a lot of the things that we're often discussing here. So
I think it goes back to a sinking feeling we all kind of had when the election happened with Biden. And it's ironic. I'm not overly political even, but there was that sense that I did not want World War III. Like, I'm so weary of conflict and this world exploding.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've kind of been feeling that way a little bit with, the stuff going on with Ukraine and nuclear arms, trading.
It's all been bubbling. It's all been bubbling. And the problem with Israel is the epicenter of everything. So I had the privilege of spending 2 months in Israel. So up in Tiberias, northern region, which, by the way, I just saw a news report today. In Israel, in the northern part, they're literally evacuating all the northern cities. Now, Tiberias is just south of technically the northern city, but it's right there, right? Because Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, they're looking to have some level of they're coming into attack, and or Israel's going to be defensive. They're preparing the stage for it. Not good at all, like terrible. But this is wild. And it was one, I think, when I saw the reports coming in of what happened that day, I was dumbfounded, because having been in Israel for a couple months, you can't go anywhere without heavily armed security. Right. Like every bus stop, every place. Like, you just get used to seeing guys carry around huge machine guns.
Right. We always talk about how, Israeli intelligence is massive, the best on the planet. And I mean, they teach and they have textbooks. I mean, like, these are the people that know intelligence. So
they're literally the fourth best army in the world.
Yeah, I believe it.
And
they do things a little bit differently too there, though. I mean, as a citizen, you're required to participate in, is it 2 years or 4 years of service?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe it was 2.
And the only reason I know this, I'm going to tell you right away, the only reason I know this is because of, I think, Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman.
Yeah, sure.
She's Israeli, and so anyways, like I said, I'm kind of a ding dong on some of this, which is why I've kind of sat back and kind of watched things. 2 years.
2 years and 8 months.
2 years.
So 32 months is the requirement.
Yeah. Is that considered conscription?
Yeah.
The only reason I ask is I hear that all the time, from people, on either side of the alley.
The thing is, when you're in Israel, so when I was there anyway, back in 2004, it was like a rite of passage. It wasn't this thing looked down upon. It was, so I was with a group of Messianic Jews. So these are Jews that believe Jesus was actually real, which is actually a very discriminated group in Israel. Okay? So even in Israel, these Messianic Jews would have to do everything they could to still get into the military, because if you don't serve in the military, it's really looked down upon, right? So we're talking about a culture that is proud to be in the military, that is proud to serve in those types of things. I mean, it's fascinating. It's so to see something like this happen was almost unimaginable, especially with the amount of hours it went on and how that happened. And you saw probably the Charlie Kirk thing. Like he was like, hey, there's something else going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. I did see that. Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that? Because that's like, whoa, like, no. Like
this is usually where I flash the disclaimer. Like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a tin hat conspiracy. Shout out to Justin Barclay, but
like Charlie Kirk's a normal dude. I mean, normal-ish.
Yeah.
Right. For him to come out and be like, no, this wasn't normal. This shouldn't have happened. Something else is happening under the surface here. That's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it is strange. And, there's a 50-year cycle that seems to be taking place right now. I mean, the last time
a 50-year cycle is in the Jewish tradition.
I do a little bit. I mean, just on the surface.
So it's considered a Jubilee year.
Yeah. Okay.
So in a Jubilee year is basically everything resets. So your debt's reset and different things like that. So the last time there was an actual war declared was 50 years ago, the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eerily the exact same time frame, like almost to the date, the exact same time frame.
Right.
Which all that stuff is just wild. So anyway, continue. Like as far as the way this whole thing's set up, the way it's happening, if you were writing a movie script, like a thriller, this is how you would be writing it.
Yeah.
Like it's not, you know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like It's almost like this is a book that somebody's reading a story out of, and it's all happening like that. And the players are just characters being told what to do. Like this is crazy.
I'll tell you, there's a fly flying around the studio here, but it is interesting to watch the news media coverage. I remember what happened with the news after 9/11. To me, and my interpretation of everything media-wise from back then was that really, to me, was the formation of the 24-hour news cycle.
Mm-hmm.
That was when they, had the flashing banner across the bottom, the terrorism alerts and that kind of stuff. It's weird to watch people foment in certain ways over video footage. Notwithstanding the conversations on X about what is and what isn't legitimate video footage.
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff that's being shown as, well, this just happened and it actually didn't happen, 2-3 years ago. But the round the clock showing of buildings being blown up, it reminds me of the invasion of Iraq.
Yep.
Which I'm not trying to compare the two, but as far as like the media coverage and seeing it and keeping us glued to the TV, because look at some of the biggest movies on the planet, are these Marvel movies where things are being, blown up.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised at how the media is reacting to this. I'm not saying that it's not important, that they shouldn't cover it, but the things that they're showing, I would rather see what's happening on the ground than these pullback photos and videos of, the hospital being blown up, a few days ago was the big one. But I don't know. It's very, very crazy to watch, and it's a world away. And I wish I had a fly swatter.
This is awesome. This is entertainment for the podcast right here.
Well, I'm just saying, if you can't, you probably can't see. We have. It's an HD camera, brother, but I don't know if it's.
Get it.
What do we give away?
It's gone. Yeah. What do we give away if we catch it? This is like in the Karate Kid. Remember?
Oh,
with the chopsticks.
Chopsticks. I remember playing that game in Nintendo. By the way. Anyway,
dude, I just showed the bald head. This is a special day.
It is a special day. You look good, though.
Thank you.
You look very good.
Bad shape bald head.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
Yeah. I at like 22 years old, I just You just got to accept things sometimes.
This is the part of the podcast where we should add in the "but I digress."
All right, so let's go back to, okay, we started.
You need to grab your lid. Grab your lid.
Yeah, we started with.
We are not so official here that we can't pause for a.
We started with the idea, though, of this. Why did it feel like World War III was going to happen 2 or 3 years ago? Why did it feel like the powers to be wanted war? Because they okay, because war is so I mean, we can,
because it's a moneymaker.
It's exactly it. Money's never lost, it's just transferred, right? It's never lost, it's just transferred. And the people who finance the wars, all those types of things, like you could literally go back to World War II, World War I, how everything was done through the central bankers and everything like that. Even every attempted or successful presidential assassination was because of a revolt against the Federal Reserve, right? Or whatever, the central banks, right? So you look at that, there's that bigger thing at play. Okay, so you kind of have this box over here of the world, what's happening in the world power, right? So let's call this human power right here. But then you have this other thing, especially when you bring in Israel, that's a spiritual thing,
right?
Which is wild. So Israel becoming a country again is a very prophetic thing from an Old Testament standpoint. So from my background, I spent a lot of time in ancient Near East studies and biblical studies in college, and then traveling and so on and so forth. When you look at the formation of Israel, that alone was impossible in almost 2,000 years. It wasn't even something that was a blip on the radar screen as far as Israel actually becoming a nation again, right? And so all of a sudden, Israel becomes a nation and crazy stuff starts transgressing, right? The advancement of the human race and society just went like the curve went straight up, rocket, Elon Musk style, to the moon, right? Or to Mars, right?
Yeah. That's
so we've been going like this from a human advancement standpoint since the formation of Israel. Okay. And so all of a sudden it's like humanity and the world is racing all of a sudden to this, like, where's it going? What's happening? Why is the concentration of what's going on coming back to Israel? That's a very fascinating discussion. Going back to like, why do we feel like we're just puppets in a story right now?
Yeah.
It's wild.
We also have no control over it from any sort of electoral point of view. I mean, that lends to, I mean, it's half a world away.
Yep.
Right. Whether or not you know any context of what's going on, you turn on the TV and you see what's happening.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
No, you just watch.
And unlike other scenarios in the past with regards to media coverage, there isn't as much of a feeling of chips in the game, if you will, right? So when we got bin Laden, right, that was the thing, right? When we invaded Iraq, a lot of people felt like that was justified because of weapons of mass destruction were allegedly there, which we now know there never was. So, you know, it just kind of starts to look like this thing, but we don't have that skin in the game like we did during those scenarios, even though we are a part of it because we do stand behind Israel.
Yep.
Well, the majority of us do. It seems like there are some, and maybe a lot here in Michigan, that don't want to seem to be on one side or the other here.
Okay, so let's dive into that. So we have two things we can dive into today that I think are practical, and I think we can then visit some other things another time. But number one, there is a obvious divide nationally. Let's say within the Democratic Party, okay, a very clear divide of stand with Israel or stand with Hamas, like legitimately stand with Hamas. So openly stand with the atrocities they did to the Israeli citizens, right? So you have the squad, right, that basically like is applauding what just happened, right? And then you have the Biden administration who's going, no, we're standing with Israel, but they're taking one step further and almost like enacting war with Israel. Like, hey, we want to get in the fight, which from the beginning I said Biden wants a war. But that's just my personal opinion. What do you think on that divide within the Democratic Party?
I think it's kind of frightening a little bit when you have, pardon me while I change or adjust my mic stand here because it's going limp on me. I'm not even kidding. It just keeps slowly fading away. This schism that is happening, it's kind of forcing people to take a side.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see those that aren't, in my opinion, I'm sure you agree, the opinion of the right side, which is innocent people shouldn't be targeted and murdered by anybody, one side or the other. And it seems that some are having a very difficult time even expressing that sentiment, which to me is crazy. And some of the groups, and we don't even need to get into this, but some of the groups that are supporting,
like BLM,
openly
supporting.
I mean, these are people that are supporting a group that would incinerate this particular group that's supporting them in a heartbeat if they could. That to me just seems crazy.
It's all big, but it's the same reason BLM formed, because it's justification from a previous perceived offense. So think about it that way.
Yeah.
Right. So nothing else we do over here matters, right? All the riots, all the things, they're all justified. We can go burn anything we want down. We can go steal anything we want because this offense happened to us.
Right.
So the perceived past hurt, whether right or wrong, or whether real or not, was justification to literally do whatever you want.
Yeah. That's a big thing that we could almost do an entire podcast on that, because that whole thing has implications to me all the way down to these kids that are doing some of these crazy things in the name of kind of mob mentality.
Yes.
But the way our surveillance system is these days, these kids are getting identified awfully fast. And then, social media cloud is a big part of it too. But that what you said, if you missed it, go back and rewind about 10, 15 seconds and listen to what Drew said, because that is a key to a lot of things. This past hurt justifies this future oppression, a perceived oppression, is toxic. It's terrible.
And it justifies their future action of no accountability. So there's zero so with Hamas, right? The perceived previous hurt of them justifies what they just did. And what they just did was absolutely abhorrent. Like, the level of torture, like, I'm not even going to go into details. All you got to do is read for yourself. And if that's squeamish for you, don't do it, because it's terrible. Like, there's nothing humane in what they did and no one was spared. Kids, parents, like, it was
indiscriminate.
It was barbaric. It's the stuff you look at and you're like, oh, that was like the Vikings in 1300 or something, like when people weren't civilized. This is that. That's what happened. And so to think Israel won't refute that or defend that. So there's so many of those things. So, okay. So the Democrats, they're divided. What's interesting, I think, too, is the Republicans are a little divided as well. You have this group, which I love, that says we stand with Israel, do whatever we need to do. And yes, we would actually side with what Biden's doing right now. And we'll go to war with them. Like, we've got your back. We're pro-Israel. There's another group. So Tucker Carlson engaged this debate. So Tucker and Ben Shapiro are like at odds with each other. Yeah. Because Tucker's like kind of a non-war kind of guy. Or like, hey, if we're going to do a war, let's do it within the United States. Or if it's doing something with us specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Tucker was even so bold to say, like, well, shouldn't we also think about the 100,000 people who died from fentanyl? Right. So that was a thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's how he and I think so personally, I think it lacked a little class to like try to compare it.
Well, why can't more than one thing be true at the same time?
Correct.
Like
Correct.
that. I mean, come on, you're telling me that we can't have the capacity to manage multiple crises at one
100%.
time, like that. And I understand exactly. So from where I sit, the libertarian side is like, we should not be moving a carrier group,
right?
Those kinds of things into that region,
right?
Bring everything home. You know, we shouldn't be getting engaged in foreign wars, yada yada. That is a hard line. Hard line's not even right, but that is probably the general sentiment among libertarians generally. Now, again, this injects the religious aspect in the entire history. And this is why history is important. Those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, right?
Yeah.
You know, the washing of our history, our short history in this country, we're seeing some of the effects of that coming around already, right? It's kind of like free speech, you know. You don't have to like all free speech, right? I mean, that's part of it. We don't have to like the history, but it's important to learn exactly what happened. But and I think that's where some of these misguided folks that of any political affiliation, when they cannot just outright condemn, you know, women and children especially being murdered. And I'm laughing because it's so effing absurd that they cannot just simply, I mean, in Michigan here, we had another resolution that was proposed, and then I don't even think it came up for a vote, to basically do exactly that. But
exactly what?
To condemn Hamas.
Oh, good.
For these attacks. I mean, they keep proposing this, and again, it's just,
I don't think our governor can.
It's just political.
Right? Did our governor make national headlines?
She did. It was a terrible tweet. You know, the violence in the region or something like that is really what
Israel.
No,
she couldn't even say Israel.
Right, and that's absurd.
That a girl.
But I know, right? Like, come on, give me a break. Have a spine and stand up for something. But going back to Tucker, I think, is becoming a little bit more libertarian-ish on multiple issues, and I think that's kind of what he was expressing. But I mean, that's, though, you know, Jordan Peterson may say that's probably about whataboutism. You know, well, what about, you know, fentanyl, and we should be paying attention. Well, yeah, this is where I say we should be able to handle everything. Well, yeah, of course. What about, you know, what's happening at our border? You know, I mean, I try and have this discussion with people too regarding Israel. Look at the border with Egypt right now. Whether you're a border fan or not, you have to look at how they're managing their border with Israel and not uptaking refugees, how their border is set up, whether or not it's humane, whether, you know, all these things. These folks seem to be doing something right in that region there. Again, you don't have to agree with it or not, but they seem to have clamped down their side of the border, and some things may need to happen.
Think about that? What do you think?
Happen here, and I do kind of find it ironic because I think Biden just this week said they're going to start building more wall here in the U.S. So
good for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's an election coming too, so you know that is
why not?
Always part of it. But
seems logical.
The conversations that are happening around this issue are varied and wide, and they're good conversations to have. You know, just what was it yesterday? You know, the Capitol was taken over here in the U.S. in Washington. Some are calling it an insurrection. Some are calling it a peaceful protest.
What happened?
Google it. There was, so as a pro, I haven't looked into it a whole lot, but it's either a pro-Hamas or a pro-Palestine rally that came into the Capitol, inside the Capitol.
Lansing or?
No, Washington. Yeah. And now I believe the Capitol Police have just issued today a statement saying that people are to preserve any digital evidence that you have if you were in or on the Capitol grounds yesterday. And a lot of people are saying, and there's probably a good argument there, that, you know, what's the difference between, you know, January 6th and, you know, some people are calling it 018 already, October 18th.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just looking this up right now.
Yeah. So, and I can tell you several major differences. One is that they were relatively peaceful, although they were, interrupting. And I don't know if they interrupted any votes or anything like that. I don't know. I don't think they were necessarily on the chamber floors, but they were in the rotunda, a lot of different places. So there are a lot of similarities, but there are some major dissimilarities. Is that a word? Dissimilarities?
Sure, we can make it.
Well, I'm making it a word now. Write it down.
Dissimilarities. Is the FUELcast lexicon.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
But I digress.
All right. So two things I want to make sure we cover here. So two things. Two things to look out for politically. Look for this over the next several months. Look for Saudi Arabia to make a switch. Okay, so if that happens, all right, so there's something wild. There's several wars. So okay, let's look at prophetically in the Old Testament, which is interesting, right? Because all of this matters. So prophetically in the Old Testament, Israel needed to become a country again with its own land. That happened, right? Okay, so check. There's a couple wars potentially, depending on how you look at things. One is the war of Gog and Magog. This comes from the book of Ezekiel 38 and 39, the chapters 39 and 38. Joel Rosenberg wrote an incredible book called The Ezekiel Option. Everybody should read it. It's fascinating. It's a ton of fun. It's a fiction book. But it's basically saying like, hey, if this was going to happen in our lifetime, here's how it would happen. And it's essentially this coalition of countries coming against the land of Israel and then God miraculously saving them. Okay. So that's a prophetic war that has never happened, that is yet to happen. But prior to that, there's Psalm 83. So this is much less talked about, which is very interesting. And it's actually considered the Ring of Fire, which the eclipse that just happened is called the Ring of Fire eclipse, which is just wild. Okay. The Ring of Fire would be considered all the countries surrounding Israel right now, which obviously Saudi Arabia is included into that, and Egypt, that they will come against Israel and that Israel then will be victorious and everybody know that God is God. Okay. That is in Psalm 83. Technically, that hasn't happened yet in history. Okay. So what I want to say is watch. If you start to see Saudi Arabia turn, because remember, Saudi Arabia and Israel were about to sign a peace accord with the Abraham Peace Accord. Okay. So that was about to happen. In fact, Biden was even trying to take that across the finish line from Trump. Okay. So this was something they either agreed on or like Biden wanted credit for or whatever. So they were trying to take this peace treaty with Saudi Arabia across the finish line. Watch to see what happens, because there's a chance. And if this happens, and if you see this starting to happen, pay attention. Obviously, Hamas right now is against Israel, and that's a war happening. Hezbollah from the north, Lebanon, would then come in and engage in the war as well. And then what you would see is almost like a circle around Israel, the other countries starting to come against Israel. Okay. If that happens, that's a prophetic war. That's not even just like, we're not living in, hey, we're politically, things are happening. No, it's almost like, wow, we're in crazy times.
Yeah. Like
different times than what the world's seen for thousands of years, right? So pay attention to that. And then I'd say, secondly, is pay attention politically from our standpoint. Watch to see what we're doing as America. I think the powers to be, whoever they are, central bankers or whomever you want to say as the big brothers who are pulling all the strings, I think they want World War III. I think it's 100%. I think a world war is wanted, desired, and is being sought after.
Yeah. This is where, whether you like him or you hate him, Russell Brand always points out the, I don't even know what the right word is to use, but, just how incestuous, these private military contractors are, with our government, with specifically members of Congress. I don't see how those folks aren't pushing for it.
Right.
And if they haven't been with Ukraine, then they might have just hit the mother lode with what's going on now.
100%.
We're going to send more money to Ukraine,
yep.
right? That in of itself,
yep.
I mean, I'm hearing like another 100 billion.
Yeah.
I don't even know how that's even possible.
We just print it. We just actually, we go to the print machines and we just start cranking it out.
Yeah. I know how that
guys. We got more money.
Working out so well. Buying power of the dollar is
okay. Stay tuned, because you know what, I think what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're probably going to revisit this topic because it's going to be relevant for the next 12 to 18
yeah and when we were talking about this in pre-production, it was like, how we can't really button this story up in any certain way because it's ongoing, right? I mean, every day, every couple of hours, there's something else that's going on. Somebody's saying they're taking responsibility for the hospital bombing. They're saying that the other side actually did it. And it's tough to really know what exactly is going on. And you kind of just have to sit back for a second and just kind of let everything kind of settle the way it is. And if you see something, don't take it, for what it's worth right away. It's like, let it be vetted a little bit and the information, and it still may be wrong, as we've seen on some pretty important issues in the last 3 years. The information that we do get is filtered in such a way that there's no way to actually question it. But I mean, this is definitely going to be an ongoing thing. There's so many different aspects of it, how we're tied to it religiously, economically, militarily, and what's going to happen coming into an election cycle. I mean, it can't be discounted that these types of people that want to be president want to be seen as a powerful figure. He or she doesn't want to be thought of as weak or feckless or whatever it is, which I think is why probably Biden went over there yesterday, or is there now? I don't even know, but it's going to be crazy to see what happens. We are living in crazy times. Nothing surprises me anymore. Language is important. I want to say this one real quick thing before we wrap up. I've heard the word terrorist used a lot. Domestic terrorist. When one party is talking about another party, the flies back. Almost got it.
You almost had him. That'd have been incredible. Like, it would have been 1 million views on YouTube.
So language is important. Terrorist has been used when describing parents at school board meetings, right? Language is important. We're now being reminded what actually terrorists and terrorism looks like. It's not a mom or a dad at a school board meeting. It's not somebody at a city council meeting or somebody at a polling location or somebody at a rally or something like that, or even one of these dumbasses that was at the Capitol, and one of them is my friend, Ryan Kelly, just got sentenced to 60 days in prison and a year of, I told him straight to his face, you're being a dumbass, but he believed in something and he now says he was misled. But language is important. It's so important. That's not a terrorist. These people are terrorists that are indiscriminately killing women and children and men, especially too, right? We always want women and children. Well, look, there are innocent fellas out there too, right? Of course, most of them they try and take as, warriors to try and go fight this crazy fight. But thank you for coming and lending your perspective to this whole thing. We always go a little bit longer than we plan to, but it's because there's so many important things to wrap up into this whole thing together. But this definitely comes under the freedom headline of, FUELcast: freedom, unity, entertainment, and certainly liberty.
Well, so I'll end with this. Liberty and freedom are something people can't take from you because you decide it. And oftentimes we trap ourselves in our own prisons. And so I think if anytime you see something happening in the world that we can't control and that feels really scary and really big, right? And if you're listening, it's like, oh, I'm not scared of this. Well, actually, you should be, right?
Yeah.
This is really bad. Here's the cool thing. Most of us all have people we love and things that we feel we can do in life. And I think oftentimes we can watch big things that happen on the news and think, oh my gosh, what can I do? Actually, you can do a lot. You can love your wife great. You can go hang out with your children and be a great dad or a mom. You can be a good friend, right? It's like, we only have so much time in this life, so live it. Right. Whatever that looks like in your life, whatever you have dominion over, that's your little garden. That's what you get to be in charge of. That's what you get to do.
Yeah.
And do it. Because the time we have is short, and soak it up and live it up.
Think globally, act locally.
Bingo. Love it.
And I want to say really quick on that last note, we keep saying as we're wrapping up, think globally, act locally. There is an ongoing fundraiser for the Lahaina Yacht Club.
Yeah, we got to do that.
We are greatly honored to be able to participate in this whole thing to raise some money for the rebuilding of the clubhouse in Lahaina after the fires that we've talked about here before, even with Dave Landau. I think Dave chipped in on that whole deal too. But
merchandise.
There's a ton of great merchandise. Website is hoperisinglahaina.org. Go check that out. Purchase some merchandise. All the proceeds go to benefit the rebuilding of the clubhouse. We're trying to do all we can for what's going on over there. We can't forget that there are people in this country that are suffering.
Big time.
So it's important to keep that in mind too. So Brother Drew, thank you for hanging out, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, subscribe, drop some comments down below. Thank you as always. For Drew, I'm Ian. For Drew, I'm Ian. There we go. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate you. Have a good one.